The neighbor of a Toronto man whose family says was left unconscious after an interaction with police is speaking out, giving his account of what happened that day and calling the police response inhumane. Last December, Alvin Francis, who is said to suffer from schizophrenia, attacked his longtime neighbor and friend Marlon Prosper. Speaking to CBC Toronto, Prosper said he mentioned in his 911 call that his friend had mental health issues. Dale Manukduk has this story.
Marlon Prosper has lived in his York Southwestern unit for over 20 years. His neighbor, Alvin Francis, moved in about 2 decades ago.
He's usually jovial. A lot of people don't know he suffers from mental health because he wouldn't know. You actually wouldn't know.
The week leading up to the incident, Prosper says Francis was being a nuisance, walking the hallway with a staple gun. On December 28th, Francis was at it again and also slamming doors. That's when Prosper got involved.
First time I got him to take his meds. The third time, he got very irritated. I was telling him to keep quiet. He's like, don't tell me what to do in my house.
Prosper says as he was walking back to his unit, Francis ran after him and punched him with a staple gun on the left side of his body.
I didn't feel any damage from the punch initially. So it slowly got worse. The symptoms slowly took effect, right? So yeah. So then I realized there's a lot of blood, it's not stopping, I have to call the ambulance. So saying I needed police response was like a judgment call because he didn't go back home. I'm like, it's the first time he's been violent and he punched me, he could punch somebody else, so I was trying to save him from himself.
Prosper says he made it clear during the 911 call.
My neighbor suffers from mental health and he was being a nuisance. I tried to calm him down and he punched me with a staple gun.
Toronto police say they were not responding to a person in crisis and that they received a second call about a person with a gun. The Special Investigations Unit, which looks at police conduct when someone is seriously injured, killed, or a gun is fired, is investigating what happened next. According to the SIU, a first wave of officers arrived and were approached by Francis, who still had the staple gun. Police fired a sock round and tasers. One officer fired their gun as Francis barricaded himself in his apartment. The emergency task force was then deployed and breached the unit, discharging more tasers and firing a less lethal gun. Prosper, who spent 6 days in hospital needing to get blood sucked out of his lungs, is shocked about the police response.
Well, it doesn't take 30 officers to restrain one person, and you don't have to go to the extent of beating somebody till they're basically dead to then get them into an ambulance.
Francis's family says he was badly injured, left unconscious, and is now blind in one eye. He's since been released from hospital on bail and facing a number of charges while the SIU continued to investigate Toronto police. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto police have identified the teen boy who was killed in a shooting in an Etobicoke apartment building yesterday evening. 16-year-old Isaiah Foga died after being shot inside the building in the area of the East Mall and Rathburn. It happened around 5:30 p.m. Another male was also shot, suffering serious injuries. Both were taken to hospital, with Isaiah succumbing to his injuries later that night. Police say the shooting involves several floors of the building. We spoke to a tenant earlier today.
The alarm in the building, usually the alarm would go off if there's a fire, but this time we weren't hearing any fire trucks pulling up with the sirens. We were hearing more Toronto police. The individual I seen, I know personally, I've seen grow up, and his mother and his grandmother were on the floor as well.
Police say 2 male suspects fled the scene in masks. Now, this is the city's second homicide of the year. It is day 2 in the trial of a man accused of murdering his ex-girlfriend back in 2022. Dylan Dowman is charged with first-degree murder in the death of Daniela Malia, who was found fatally shot in a North York parking garage. Ali Chiasson has more from court.
The Crown argues that 23-year-old Daniela Malia was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, Dylan Dowman, who they allege planned her killing in advance. Today, the jury saw photos from the crime scene inside the parking garage. Daniela's body on the ground beside a parked car, the blood and shell casings, as well as bullet fragments all around her. 3 first responders took to the stand, a firefighter, 2 police officers, as well as a forensic investigator who went through their notes and observations from that afternoon on August 18, 2022. All the while, 35-year-old Dylan Dowman sat in the prisoner's box, listening to testimony with a neutral expression. We haven't gotten to the evidence yet that shows the shooting, but the Jane Wilson apartment complex where it happened is a community housing building, so there are cameras. We're expecting to see that evidence by the end of the week. This is a jury trial. It began as a 14-person jury panel, but one juror was dismissed today for falling asleep during testimony, not once, but twice. The trial can continue as a 13-person jury panel, but the judge did remind everybody the significance of this case and the importance of comprehending all of the testimony and evidence being presented. Court continues tomorrow. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Strong reaction continues to pour in here at home and around the world to Donald Trump's latest stunning proposal on the Middle East, specifically the future of Gaza. The U.S. president saying last night that the U.S. should take control of Gaza and the Palestinians should leave.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it. And I don't want to be cute, I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad, this could be so magnificent.
Trump said he won't rule out sending U.S. troops into Gaza as part of a takeover, but he gave few details on what his takeover proposal would look like, including where the more than 2 million people in Gaza would go. Now, here in Toronto, Trump's proposal is being met with outrage from those who have family members and loved ones in Gaza. Brittany Billette has reaction.
It's a new colonial settlement project by the United States.
Bashar al-Shawwa came to Toronto 6 months ago hoping to fight for peace. He has roots in Gaza and left behind his wife and kids who are currently living in the West Bank. Al-Shawwa says U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to take over Gaza threatens Palestinians and his family.
As a father of 4 kids still back home in Palestine, I don't want my kids to suffer from this endless, insane and injustice conflict.
Al-Shawwa says during the war on Gaza in the last 15 months, he's already lost his niece and over 100 family members in the war.
No words can describe the trauma, the continuous trauma. Like, we hoped with the ceasefire that justice would prevail.
But now Trump says he's planning on turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East and resettling Palestinians elsewhere, shattering decades of U.S. policy and contradicting international law. Local human rights groups say they're appalled.
He's outlining a plan for the ethnic cleansing of the entire population of Gaza. He's talking about the forcible removal of 2 million people out of their homes and speaking about it essentially like it's some kind of real estate deal.
Today, Trump's top diplomat walked back some of his statement. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Trump is only looking to temporarily displace Gazans to allow for reconstruction. Still, there are calls for wider condemnation.
Unfortunately, I'm worried that the Canadian government is going to be kind of cautious about approaching Trump. But we have to be clear. Israeli and U.S. officials are openly plotting genocide and ethnic cleansing, in not using euphemisms, but in very clear terms.
Al-Shawwa says despite what's been said in the last few days, he hasn't lost faith that peace can prevail.
We don't have the luxury to lose hope. We don't have other option. I do believe in my people. I do believe in humanity that will stand together to stop this madness.
Brittany Billette, CBC News, Toronto.
Turning now to the provincial election campaign, and the Ontario NDP is promising to end homeless encampments. The party says it'll do that by adding tens of thousands of supportive housing units. Now, it's a clear contrast to the recent encampment plan by the previous PC government. Queen's Park reporter Lorena Redekop has this story.
NDP leader Marit Stiles places the blame squarely on the previous government for the rise in people living in tents.
Doug Ford has failed the people of Ontario, and we're going to fix it.
She says if she becomes premier, she'll get rid of encampments by adding 60,000 supportive housing units and also upload the funding of shelters from municipalities to the province. She continued her attack on Ford.
He has failed on housing. He has failed on health care. He has failed on creating good jobs. And he has failed to make life affordable.
Ford was asked about the NDP's encampment plan.
We're continuously funding shelters, and we're going to make sure we get people an opportunity to find a roof over their head and find the most important thing, what pays for all this is the economy.
Shortly before calling the election, his government added $75 million for municipalities to end encampments. And late last year, Ford's government introduced tough legislation on encampments.
This has to stop, and it will stop.
Giving law enforcement more powers to clear them and banning public drug use. That didn't pass before the early election call, but the PCs promise to bring that back if they win. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario has estimated more than 80,000 people in the province were homeless last year. The Liberal leader also blamed Ford for the increase.
There's a group of mayors along with this premier that wants to scoop these people up and move them and put them where, I ask you? Because we need a plan. They need to be housed.
Standing at the far side during the NDP announcement, someone who works directly with homeless people.
I'm still seeing people who are contending with frostbite, people with completely blackened toes, because it is really cold out there.
She'd like to know the cost of the NDP's plan.
I would like to see more dollar figures attached to things in terms of how we're going to support encampments and what that looks like. But I think the platform overall is right now the only one that I can feasibly support.
As for that cost, so far the party isn't providing any estimate.
That'll all come, but I will tell you this. We can't afford not to do this.
The NDP says it will be coming out with the information on how much this will cost for this promise and all others during this campaign. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
Doug Ford says his PC party will remove tolls on the publicly owned stretch of Highway 407.
Tolls are absolutely horrible. They hit hard-working families the most. Tolls are nothing more than a tax on drivers trying to get home or to a job.
The PCs say removing tolls would save daily commuters up to $7,200 each year. The NDP previously announced it would do the same, adding that it would be done within the first 100 days of forming government. Ford also announced he would permanently cut the provincial tax on gasoline. Liberal Party leader Bonnie Crombie was in Hamilton this morning announcing her party's plan to double social assistance rates, saying it's necessary to meet the cost of living.
It will be permanent. The important distinction, though, is that it will be phased over a 2-year period. We won't try and do it all in 1 year. It'll be completed over 2 years.
The Ontario Disability Support Program currently maxes out at just over $1,300 a month for a single person. The NDP and Greens say they will also double ODSP. Now, meanwhile, the PCs say they'll continue to raise payments each year in line with inflation. And healthcare has been a central part of Crombie's platform, particularly getting every Ontarian a family doctor within 4 years. But today, she had a bit of a blunder when talking about healthcare, reading aloud a note a constituent sent her that actually criticized the previous provincial Liberal government, something she appeared to only notice while reading it to a group of citizens.
If anyone has a medical emergency, our nearest emergency is 20 to 25 minutes away. Niagara Falls, Welland is 40 minutes away because there is no direct route from Fort Erie, or the farthest is in St. Catharines, probably 45 minutes away. The previous government stripped the hospital, this government, not the other, the Ford government stripped the hospital and reduced it to an urgent care center. Ford will finish us off. On the bright side, we do have 3 cemeteries. Oh gosh.
You hear there the residents' message referencing the Fort Erie Hospital, which was turned into an urgent care center under Dalton McGuinty's Liberals more than 15 years ago. Now, we reached out to Crombie's campaign for a response. They told us Doug Ford has had 7 years to fix healthcare, calling it, quote, his mess to clean up. Welcome back. At Toronto City Council today, much of the focus continued to be on the tariff threats from south of the border. But as Sarah McMillan reports, while the city is eager to encourage people to buy Canadian, the city manager is warning against a blanket ban on U.S. purchases.
We have to stand together for Canada.
My name is Vincent Crisanti, and I'm Canadian.
Lots of patriotism on display in council chambers today as councillors discussed and unanimously passed a pair of motions. One symbolic to affirm Canada's independence. The other from Councillor Mike Cole asking the city to create a Buy Local, Buy Canadian campaign.
Consumers are already doing it. They know that this is a whole new ballgame, and so we've got to inoculate ourselves against the next wave of this tariff hysteria.
As well as encouraging residents to buy local, there's also been discussion about the city's own purchasing. Mayor Olivia Chow says the city is looking at its procurement policies.
It's not just City of Toronto contracts, it's all our agencies, boards, and commissions. Think about TTC, right? They have millions, multi-million dollars contracts.
Despite the tariff pause, Chow says there has been progress in the last 2 days on the city's response plan. But what was made clear by staff today is that cutting out American companies altogether is not likely.
I think the intent here is for us to be very clear about trying wherever possible to exercise more direction towards Canadian products or products that aren't American. But to say a blanket piece that prohibits that would not be prudent for the City of Toronto.
The city spends billions each year on procurement. The city manager estimates American companies account for less than 10% of that money. While today's motions had unanimous support, there are calls for the city to do more by looking at ways to directly help Torontonians who could be affected by tariffs, like property tax cuts for small businesses.
That is the tool that we have at our disposal today, and that is how we could provide some real relief for people to help them keep the lights on.
Council is set to pass the city budget and tax rate next week. Sarah McMillan, CBC News, Toronto.
As part of Canada's deal with Trump to delay U.S. tariffs, Prime Minister Trudeau has committed to designating Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations. Thomas Dagla has more on that.
This is what police say Mexican drug cartels are slipping into Canada. $83 million worth of cocaine, destined for every corner of the country, and recently traced to a murderous cartel making inroads here.
They were prominent. I mean, if you look at what we have here right now, this is a large load.
In a new pledge, the Prime Minister announced Ottawa will list cartels as terrorists. Just one of the efforts to ward off U.S. tariffs, as the Trump administration issues this fresh warning.
The Mexican drug cartels are rapidly expanding in Canada, and that's a danger.
Cartels are known to smuggle truckloads of drugs across the U.S. border and into Canada. But a recent bust in BC suggests they're also producing enough here to send abroad. At this super lab, police say the chemicals seized would have amounted to nearly 100 million doses of fentanyl.
The fact that they are here, I will say thriving, it is dangerous for sure.
Journalist Luis Najera investigated the cartels in Mexico and fled to Canada. He sees their growing influence here, with criminal groups exploiting Pacific and Atlantic ports and laundering millions.
It has been significantly increasing, of course, because of the advantages that Canada offers.
But experts wonder what help will come now, with a trail of murders left behind, including the cartel-linked shooting of an innocent Indian couple in Ontario, still unresolved.
The benefit of designating the cartels is primarily a political one in terms of appeasing Trump and signaling to our American allies that we are willing to play ball.
The public safety minister insists the move will help authorities track the cartel's money and disrupt their operations once they're listed as terrorist groups alongside ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Right, Colette is here with the look at the forecast. And Colette, it might be a messy drive for many people tomorrow morning, right?
Yeah, I am thinking that tomorrow morning's commute is going to be on the slow side, so plan accordingly. This is your forewarned kind of thing in terms of what's going to be happening. It's the same system, a couple of different things going on at different parts of the province. So for southwestern Ontario, that's where the freezing rain warning is actually in place for Windsor over towards Chatham, Kent. And then on the other end, towards the east, a winter weather travel advisory, that small area near the nation's capital where the snowfall amounts may be over 10 centimeters there. But we're kind of sandwiched in between. We're still going to have the impact to some extent from the system for sure, but it will mostly be a snow event for us. So there's that freezing rain, the area where you see the pink or at least some mixed precipitation. You see the more purpley blue, that is snow coming into the GTA starting as early as like 5 a.m. and then spreading from west to east. Should largely be over by the time we get to the lunch hour. hour, leaving behind a good 3 to 5 centimeters. I'll show you in more detail here in just a moment. But so that's what's going to make the morning commute slow and messy. But what happens on the backside? So later in the day, yes, in the afternoon, but even into the evening, especially, these winds are really going to be ramping up, and some of those gusts are going to be quite alarming. And I'll show you that in just a moment here. So there's giving you more of an idea. You see towards Cornwall, Ottawa, the amounts, Kingston even maybe a little bit higher with the system going through. So that's why they have the winter weather travel advisory there. Our overnight temperatures actually will be kind of coming up. This is mid period through the overnight. They should be around -2 by tomorrow morning as the system's moving through. But some of that heaviest snow is likely going to be right there between like 7 and 8 a.m. In terms of the intensity, and it will be blowing around, so some reduced visibility in that sense as well. By afternoon, we go up to 2 degrees, so we'll likely see some melting actually occurring. But those winds, as I say, kind of gusting for Toronto to maybe 60 kilometers an hour, some of the gusts. But I was looking at Orangeville, 80 to perhaps 100 kilometers an hour. So up into cottage country or the further north you travel, some really extreme winds tomorrow evening, and that's going to drive some of those lake effect snows. I also want to show you the 5-day and spend a little time on this because, yes, some cold air comes back in Thursday night, sure. Friday, we get a breather. Saturday, not looking bad either. But Saturday night, we have the potential through the overnight hours of another snow event. That one could be in the neighborhood of 10 centimeters or more. It's still a few days off, but a next thing I'll be watching after tomorrow.
Yeah, quite a bit more coming possibly on Saturday.
Very wintry. Here we are.
Yep. Thanks so much, Colette. And that's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for watching. Have a great night, everyone.